All right, it looks like we have most people here that are going to show. So welcome to the SR 520 Montlake Project October online monthly meeting. I'm Ryan Bianchi with the Graham Communications team, and I am moderating the meeting this afternoon. Also in the virtual room, we have our presenter, Cheryl Webster, who is the communications coordinator with Graham, and several folks from WashDOT will be online who will help answer your questions if needed. So before I pass you off to Cheryl for our presentation, I'd like to walk through a few housekeeping items in an effort to reduce background noise and improve everyone's experience. All attendees are muted today. You can adjust the volume by clicking on the audio settings. During the presentation, you are encouraged to engage with us. We invite you to submit your questions as they come to you. This is helpful so you don't forget them along the way. You can send them through the Q&A box, which you can see there on your screen. If you would like to view closed captions during the meeting, click on the closed caption button at the top of your screen. These captions are generated by the Zoom application, and we are not responsible for their accuracy. When you submit a question, we request that you send short, complete sentences. This helps us when reading out the questions during the Q&A portion of our event. Please do not use the chat button. We may not see your question if you submit it that way. All right, let's take a look at the agenda, and I will pass it over to Cheryl.
All right, thanks a lot, Ryan. Like Ryan mentioned, we're going to talk about the current and upcoming work on site, as well as how to stay informed with the project. And then at the end of the presentation, we will get to all of the questions and comments. So feel free to populate that as we go through the presentation, and we will get to them at the end. So as many of you know, the Montlake Project is made up of three major components. One was the new eastbound bridge. The second being the Montlake Lid, which includes the HOV and bus lane improvements, and then the on and off ramp. And then we also have the bicycle and pedestrian bridge, which connects the north and south pathways. So back on September 16th, we opened up the HOV ramp and the new HOV lanes across the lid structure. So in the left-hand picture, you can see an image of what that HOV ramp looks like for those who have not had the pleasure of traveling on it yet. So that heads both east and west onto 520. Sorry, let me clarify that. It is for traffic heading west off of getting onto Montlake and Lake Washington, westbound 520, and then it gets you back onto eastbound 520. So in the right-hand photo, you can see an image of how that intersection works at the top of the ramp. So Ryan, if you can sort of follow me around that to clarify with the pointer. When you're coming westbound on 520 and you get up onto the top of the lid structure, you can use the HOV ramp, which Ryan is highlighting there for 3+ riders or bus traffic will be using that. The other alternate route is for you to take the off ramp, which is the white line there, and that will both intersect at the stop sign intersection on the top of the Montlake Lid. So HOV traffic can carry straight through that intersection into the transit center area and the Montlake Lid area. And then the white traffic general purpose can carry through that intersection to Lake Washington Boulevard, heading east or west on Lake Washington. Then for traffic moving on eastbound Lake Washington Boulevard, they can utilize the HOV lanes with 3+ passengers going eastbound on Lake Washington Boulevard and then turning onto the ramp. They can also utilize it coming from southbound Montlake across the lid and getting onto the ramp there as well. So that's a large change to traffic flow. There has been a few adjustments to signage, additions, and some additional line striping and signal timing to improve this intersection and movement. But we hope that everybody is taking advantage of that HOV easy access to 520. So I touched on it for a minute. On top of the Montlake lid is the Lid Transit Center. So the transit area in the left-hand image here shows a plan view of what that looks like. And on the right hand is currently what it looks like on site. We're just finishing up those transit canopies currently. So on the left-hand image, I'll walk you through what that will, the final layout will be. So when you are on the north side of the HOV lanes, there is a small transit shelter being installed there, which we're calling Transit Shelter A. And then on the south side of the HOV lanes is the larger transit area, which includes a transit canopy on Montlake Boulevard for the bus lane there, as well as wrapping around the corner and onto the HOV lanes all across the lid. So on the top hand image on the right hand side, you can see the transit canopies that are on the south side. When we took that photo, we're standing on the north side looking south. You can see those canopies. And then the bottom image is from the reverse direction, standing on the south side looking north at the transit canopies. And in that image, you can see some of the transit seating, the concrete seating fixtures that are currently installed there. What we will start to see happen in the next coming weeks here is that various sidewalks and trails are going to start to open up. So the transit canopies, I didn't touch on this, so I will jump back for a minute. Those are going to be handed over likely at the end of the month to King County, King County Metro. So it is up to them when they start utilizing that for their routes. We don't have a date as to when they will start to actually have buses stop at those transit canopies, but it will be handed over to them at the end of April or at the end of October. The sidewalks, we have started to open up some of those now, and the rest of them will start to open up in the next couple of weeks as well. So this image shows the path that we've currently opened up on Monday of this week. So this path, and we might have to jump back and forth here, Ryan, between the two images from the last screen and this one. This is the pathway that runs from Roanoke down on Montlake, or pardon me, on Lake Washington Boulevard, and wraps the corner and crosses the lid structure just north of Lake Washington Boulevard. Perfect, thank you. So that goes all the way around the corner on Lake Washington, which you see here in the image, and then wraps back down to the lid. We currently do not have the pedestrian land bridge open, so that's barricaded off if you have had the pleasure of walking that path already. And that will open up beginning of, or end of October, beginning of November. So that bicycle and pedestrian bridge you can see in the far end of the left-hand picture is the barricade at the end of that path. That is where the pathway is blocked off currently. Once this is opened up at the end of October, we will allow pedestrians across and connect to the north side of the pathway. On the right-hand image, you can see a rendering of what the outlook will look like. That is where people will be able to stand and look onto the lake. That's just outside of this image on the left-hand side. This currently is not open because we are completing the pathway system on the north side of the project. Again, as soon as that is complete, we will open this structure. The pedestrian tunnel is another one of the path features that we recently opened. So on September 16th, we did open that tunnel. So the Bill Dawson Trail, the temporary Bill Dawson Trail that was in effect for the last several years was closed. That's in the yellow dotted line on the right-hand image. And we now have pedestrians moving through the new Montlake Tunnel. So that wraps down on the west-hand side of the Montlake Boulevard and then goes down a ramp and underneath of Montlake through the tunnel system. That will eventually connect all the way back across to the pedestrian land bridge with the system of paths that's currently shown in the right-hand picture. Those will be opening again in the next couple weeks once we make all those final connections. This is another view of that tunnel and the work that's been occurring over there. So on the right-hand image, you can see the pathway that's been opened up that pedestrians are currently using to access the tunnel. And on the left-hand image is the stairs, and we anticipate those stairs to be open very soon. Just completing some of the railing there, and then that will be another alternate access point to that tunnel and pathway system. So as you can tell, we're getting to the end of things and things are starting opening up. A lot of the work that is still to be done is systems testing and commissioning is what we call it. So October 16th and 23rd are the next upcoming commissioning closures. So you will see a closure of 520 in order to complete some of the testing underneath of the lid structure. So a lot of that testing is things such as the fire suppression system, lighting, signage, emergency gates. All of those systems are tested to make sure that they're operating correctly. So those overnight closures will be occurring to complete that activity. So along with that, there's a few final closures that'll be nightly closures in order to complete that testing and some primarily striping on the roads. So for the next couple weeks, we can see that we will have some Montlake Boulevard closures, northbound or southbound, or full closures at night. There'll be single nights opening back up during the day. That is to complete final striping on the roadway. So we have to close that so that we can do that striping, have nobody driving through those lines, and complete that final piece to the roadway system. Those, again, are only nighttime closures. Then we will also have, you can see in the green color, some of those commissioning weekends. So those are, again, nightly closures, and we'll be doing systems testing during that time. So we do take into consideration all of the other closures within the city, and also, of course, the sporting events and activities throughout. So you can see some of those listed in the pinky orange color, being weekends that we can't do operations or work. So I'll run through this. Much of it is no longer in effect, but we will touch on all of these items. So typical working hours are 7 a.m. till 10 p.m. on weekdays. Weekends start at 9. Impact driving is no longer occurring, so we can skip over that. Crews do operate out there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We were, until recent months, working under an MPPC&V. That is now ended, and for those in the area, you will be receiving T&V notices that outline any of the work that we will be doing at night. Much of that work is not anticipated to be any louder than work that we have been doing for several years. But as part of this new variance, we do have to call out all nighttime hours and operations that are occurring during that time. Throughout the project, we do have noise and vibration monitors that are active and monitoring the project 24 hours a day. Those will also soon be ending as work is wrapping up. As soon as we have completed all nighttime activities, those will also be removed from site. Until then, they are all out there keeping track of all of those levels for us. I think I've touched on everything on that screen, Ryan.
Yes, thank you, Cheryl. So we will get to your questions and answers in just a moment. Currently, we have 6 questions. So want to take a moment to remind you to please send any questions that have come up our way. If you can't see the Q&A box, try tapping your screen or moving your mouse and it'll appear again. So take a look at that. All right, so we've arrived at the Q&A section. Oh, sorry, I forgot. We got to get the how to stay informed. One of the quickest, most direct ways is to send or call our 24-hour construction hotline. That number is on your screen, 206-775-8885. You can email us with your questions at the sr520bridge@washdot.wa.gov. Visit our website. We have a construction corner that lists where our upcoming construction closures are going to be. It's also on the website. You can follow us on Twitter. We have email updates. There are construction cameras, and we always appreciate you participating in events like you are today. Okay, so now let's get to the Q&A. So I'm going to read through the questions, and Cheryl will answer them. If you feel like we didn't adequately answer your question, please let us know on the Q&A. So first question is from Jonathan. You're moving modular office buildings to the Washtenaw Peninsula. Are you going to continue to use the peninsula for offices and as a staging and storage area for materials and equipment? Are you going to ever return the peninsula to the public for park use? And if so, when? I think that question's actually probably more for Steve than for Cheryl.
Yeah, if we can have Steve or Tony address that question, that would be great.
This is Steve. Yeah, the plan is to use that during the Portage Bay Bridge and Roanoke Lid construction, which Tony, I think we've got about 7 years, and then they'll move out and eventually restore that back to the way it was. Probably better, yeah.
Thank you. Nancy asks, the traffic flow at the intersections of Lake Washington Boulevard and Montlake Boulevard and Lake Washington Boulevard and 24th Avenue East is awful, particularly during times of increased traffic. How and when will this be addressed?
Thanks for your question, Nancy. So we are actively sharing all of this feedback with the city of Seattle. They are the ones that control the timing of the lights and the sequencing of the lights themselves. So I know they're actively looking at all of the intersections and how they relate to each other, making adjustments in the timing. If there is a specific, you noted a specific location, but if there's specific locations, specific times of day, specific days, the more information that we receive and can share with the city, the more likely they are to be able to analyze any potential problems and make improvements on their system. So certainly we will share this information with them and we continue to share all of that with them for future improvements.
Jonathan asks, what is the finish date for the 520 lid? By finish, I mean the removal of all the orange barrels and sidewalk closures.
Thanks for your question. We anticipate most of the work to be done on the lid at the end of October. I'm just trying to think, the only activities that are active on the lid itself right now, I believe, are the transit canopies, which are to be done at the end of the month. Unfortunately, you'll probably see some barrels still out on the project. There will be punch list items and small scopes of work that we will be having to complete as a result of that for the next several months. But the large majority of those barrels should be removed very soon at the end of the month.
How many cars
sorry,
and trucks?
Ryan, can you not delete the questions off the Q&A so I can reread them?
Yes, sorry.
Thank you.
Yep. How many cars and trucks per workday do you expect to enter and leave the Washtenaw Peninsula area?
I'm actually gonna call on Steve. I think he has the statistics on that.
I'm sorry, say that again?
Oh, sorry, it's for the peninsula area again, Steve. Do you know what the anticipated number of cars and activity is to the peninsula for the Portage Bay project?
I have no idea, but we can find out. I don't know.
All right, Jonathan, we will make sure that we get that answer.
Thank you for the question. Sorry.
Yes. Sharsti, Sharsti is asking, why did you close access to the Bill Dawson Trail from the west side of Montlake Boulevard? This has never been communicated to the Shelby Hamlin neighborhood and is very disappointing. Why not keep access on both sides of Montlake? I don't get it. You should be making it easier, not harder, for people in the community to get around.
Thank you for the comment and feedback. I think you're meaning the east, or sorry, the west side is correct.
Cheryl, this is Brian. Do you want me to take this question?
Sure, if you want.
So Sharsti, a lot of the questions about the Washtenaw Peninsula are applicable to the next project, which is the Portage Bay project. And something that's not apparent, because Graham is finishing our contract and a different contractor is starting the next one, is that area there by what's known as the Noah driveway and the potential west access to the Bill Dawson Trail will be an access point for that next contractor. So if you look carefully, if you're able to go to that area and look carefully at what Graham has built, you'll see some really nice cast in place concrete walls that have kind of a scalloped or almost a beehive finish to them. Those are permanent walls. And then if you look at that same area where you're talking about a potential access on the west side to Bill Dawson Trail, you'll see some just smooth, large concrete blocks, and those are temporary walls. So after the next contractor is done, I think the timeline I was given previously was about 7 years, there will be an access in that area to the Bill Dawson Trail. But right now, that specific location is going to be an access for that construction project. So what you're asking for is part of the long-term plan for the area, but it won't be available until the next construction project is complete.
Thank you, Brian. Another question from Sharsti. How many more 520 a Montlake weekend closures will it ever end?
Thanks for your question. So if we can flip back to that calendar view, please, Ryan. So we don't anticipate, we're actually working through with WashDOT the closures for the next couple months. We're trying to avoid any full weekend closures moving forward. What you will see is nightly closures of Montlake or Lake Washington or 520 to complete things like that striping or commissioning that I was previously talking about. So we don't anticipate there'll be many at all, if any, full weekend closures at this point.
Alex wants to know, when will the plaza at the corner of East Roanoke Street and East Montlake Place be completed?
Thanks for the question, Alex. Along with a lot of the work, the plaza part will be done at the end of October. The plaza is actually just the corner peak, and I don't know, Ryan, if we can scroll back to the overhead view of the project. But that is just the corner of that property. The market property itself, which is where we have some staging going on, and materials and a couple trailers currently located. That property will be turned back over to WashDOT in December. So until then, we will be occupying that space. So that it'll just be the peak, the tip of that lot that is on the Roanoke Montlake corner that will be open.
Another question from Alex. Is the 520 closure in November intended to be weekend long or just nightly?
We were actually just working through those details, Alex. So we anticipate it will just be nightly.
Elias wants to know, will there be any more closures on 520 bike pedestrian trail before all the pathway trails on the lid are completed?
Brian's can correct me if I'm wrong here, but I don't believe I think we will need one more closure to do the final tie-in. Right now we have a temporary path paved in there. We may need a short closure to do the final tie-in of that path down at the East Park Drive East location. But that work will be wrapping up and closures will be stopping as well.
When will the pedestrian bridge be open?
Like I mentioned before, that is all waiting on the completion of those paths on the north side. We anticipate that to be done at the end of the month as well.
All right, another question from Alex. In previous monthly updates, landscaping and the opening of the lid was intended to be completed months earlier than it actually is now. What was the biggest driver of delays beyond just rewording when those would be completed?
Sure, I can take this question if
Sure.
you would like.
Sure.
So I'm going to give several answers. It's a big, complex project. So two contributing factors were the delivery of the bus canopies, the steel frames that you see have been installed recently, was delayed because the company that fabricated those, which has been a very solid company supplying fabricated materials to WashDOT projects for decades, actually went out of business in the early summer. And so fortunately, those frames had been fabricated, but because of that company's issues and payment issues, they had not been galvanized and coated on the schedule we expected. So we received those later, and that explains some of the delays there on the lid. Also, the planting has been taking longer than expected. There's a number of reasons for that. One of the reasons is because the project has been delayed, as you all know, by more than a year because of COVID and because of the Teamsters strike and other issues. Plants are not an off-the-shelf item in that they are cared for in nurseries, and the inventory of plants changes from year to year. So our landscaping contractor is taking quite a bit longer to plant, just physically put plants in the ground as they sort through that availability and when they can receive shipments, etc. If I think about the sidewalks and delays there, a lot of it has been, it may not be clear to the public, but there are special terms on this contract as far as having a water treatment facility available, because specific areas within the contract limits had contaminated soils before the project started. And so Graham had to have a water treatment system, which we housed over just north of the PLB until specific areas of soil were covered with topsoil. So the area that we were just talking about in the Bill Dawson Trail specifically had to be covered with topsoil before we could remove a water treatment plant that was over north of the pedestrian land bridge. And that water treatment plant was too big to go up Hamlin Alley. It had to come across the RSIP path coming off the bridge and onto the ramps and onto 520. Also was too heavy to travel over any kind of finished sidewalk. So there's a complex sidewalk intersection with colored sidewalk over north of the PLB that we're just getting started on. And that couldn't start until the water treatment plant was removed, which couldn't start until the Bill Dawson area was landscaped. So there's just a lot of quite technical interconnected pieces of work that this project contained and that have been challenging to sequence considering the other delays to the project that have happened over the past year. So that's three reasons. There's many more, but there is not at this point in time one single reason.
Thank you, Brian. Can you confirm whether the November closures is just the roadway, or does it include the multi-purpose trail?
I believe at this point in time, it is only commissioning weekend. So I think we are only going to be taking the roadway. And again, that may only be a nightly closure, not the full weekend closure. That's currently shown on this calendar.
Thank you. Debbie wants to know if it is possible to use black wire fencing around the old hop-in property after the property is done being used for staging until it is sold. It would fit in with the black signposts and lampposts.
Thanks for your question, Debbie. It is in our contract to pave and fence that lot before we leave it at the end of December. I cannot comment off the top of my head what that fencing spec is, whether it's black wire fencing or not. But it will be a fenced property when we leave it at the end of December.
Sure, Steve wants to know, can you comment on what landscaping is left to complete on the west side of Montlake Boulevard, as well as the traffic island near Hamlin Street? Right now, it's a random splattering of new plants and a lot of weeds.
Sure, I can take that if you'd like.
Yeah, sure.
So the area that we talked about along the Bill Dawson Trail and the island on Hamlin and the islands between Sidewalk and Montlake Boulevard across the lid and north of the lid, those are all areas where the planting has not been completed. As I mentioned, plant procurement, the contractor hasn't been able to get all of the plants for those areas. So you're right, they have put some bushes there because once they receive plants, they survive much better in the ground than in pots. But those areas have not been completed yet. You mentioned the weeds. Agreed, those are an eyesore. So our landscaping contractor has a requirement to continue to maintain those areas, including caring for those plants after they've been planted and removing the weeds for several years after we're done. So there will be continued watering, replacement of dead plants, and weed removal for several years by Graham and our subcontractor after the planting itself is complete.
Thank you. There's been an unused utility pole and exposed piping in the parking strip in front of Jonathan's house for years. You still have not removed the pole or buried the piping. When, if ever, will that be done?
Thank you, John. I did speak with Cruz about that corner a week or so back when the last inquiry came in. I believe that is anticipated to be done beginning of November, end of October, beginning of November. So we should see that wrap up very shortly.
And then we have one final question, unless anybody writes in anymore, but and this one is actually, I think, back to Steve again, because it is related to the Portage Bay project. But the 7-year closure of the west access of the Bill Dawson Trail is disruptive to the neighborhood. The reroute crosses Montlake Boulevard twice or across the 8 lanes of on-off ramp traffic across the lid. Can alternatives be considered?
Yeah, that's a good question, and one that I don't know that I have an answer to. I don't think so. I think they've got to use that area for construction for the Portage Bay Bridge and Roanoke Lid project. And we are looking, the design builder is Skanska. By the way, they're starting their own monthly meetings now. They had their first last night. And so you could tune into one of those meetings to ask that same question. I know that they are planning to have the Bill Dawson Trail open until probably spring of next year. So we'll have some use of it, but that will end, and then there'll be a 7-year closure. But that's a great question.
Thanks, Steve. And that is it for the questions that we have. So while you feel free to try to type something in while we're wrapping up here, but until then, that's it for the meeting. Thank you for participating. And if we didn't get to a full answer to your question, please let us know and we'll follow up with you. Tomorrow, you'll receive a follow-up email with our 24-hour hotline number and our email address in case you're unable to note them through the presentation. Cheryl, Steve, anything else you want to add before we sign off?
Nope, there's nothing else for me.
Nothing from me.
All
Thank
right,
you.
great. We appreciate everybody joining us this afternoon and have a great rest of your day.